Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining us today here at HighRoad U. Today our topic is gaining new leads through eBooks. My name is Venetia Mangus. I'm the Director of Consulting here at HighRoad Solutions. My experience is in digital marketing, so I often deal with lead generation programs such as the one we're going to talk about today. I've spent a lot of time in the association market helping associations optimize their lead generation campaigns and really talk through, what they should be doing, how they should go about putting the campaigns together, targeting particular users, and identifying measurement for success. So this is an interesting topic because it seems like it could be complicated, but actually when we break it down, it's actually pretty easy. Again, the hardest part is probably the content piece, which is great because that's not the piece that I specialize in. That is in fact the piece that the associations that all of you specialize in, right? So today we're kind of going to pull everything together. Just some housekeeping items. If I happen to drop or if the call stops or anything, just hang tight and I will dial back in. So today, what I want to cover is specifically kind of breaking it out into pieces and putting the whole campaign back together again. Specifically, we'll talk about leads and why you need them. I think there's a general perception. I think that there's general understanding of what you want leads for and why you need them. So we'll string it together so to help you in case you need to make the business case to other people in your organization. We'll also talk about eBooks and why they're such powerful calls to action that you can leverage. We'll talk about some just high-level details of what you want to hit on when you are talking about an ebook. There's some subtleties in terms of, the impression or what an ebook was back in the day, at least 5 years ago versus what it could be today. And then, lastly, just kind of a quick roundup on how would you go about measuring for success, right? Let's say you put your whole campaign together, you've got your little lead gen program running. What is it exactly that you're looking for, and how would you kind of want to evaluate its success once you put it out there? So I've got a little case study for you to kind of follow along with. But first, we'll start with a general definition of just what are leads, right? So, lead generation is that it's become it's a phenomenon. Lead generation is part of the digital marketing world. It's been there for a while. In the world of associations, it's probably starting to bubble up to the surface more and more, right? So it's the initiation of a consumer interest or inquiry into your products or services of business. Marketing leads in particular are brand-specific leads generated for a unique offer, right? So you often hear all these terms kind of thrown down there. Really what lead generation is about getting the contact information of someone you don't know who is possibly interested in something that you have to offer, right? So rather powerful kind of today for associations in particular, because now you're faced with growth, right? You're being tasked with not only doing member retention, but now you're probably as part of the marketing team, right, or membership, you're being tasked to really kind of grow your membership base. So you are looking to grow revenue, your membership base, expose your brand a little bit more outside of the circle of who you currently market to from a retention standpoint, right, and get in front of people who should be your members, right? So it's really kind of, lead generation programs are specifically designed for that purpose, right? So you're always looking for a way, to answer the question of what can I offer to people who should be members but who are not? What can I offer to them in exchange for something, right? What will they be willing to give me so that I can further interact with them, right? And so before we get started on this, I just want to kind of touch really quickly on one of the challenges that I think associations face, right? And when you're in the day-to-day world of marketing, it's easy to kind of oversee or kind of miss that because you're caught up in communications and retention and doing all your email campaigns and programs, right? But this is what we're looking at from this is typically a marketing technology stack for an association. It's represented here. So you've got your AMS, you've got your CMS, your content management system, and your association management system. You've got an email service provider doing all your email marketing. You've possibly got an event management system as well, and then you've got maybe a combination of PR, advocacy, and social, right? So just, these are kind of your big technology pieces that are all strung together. And you use them on a regular basis, right? And it's from, this is kind of representing how data kind of flows from place to place, right? So from your user journey perspective, you've got email really driving interactions to the website and driving people to your event management system, possibly a little bit to social, kind of wherever you are. And then, as that data starts to come through, it's starting to link back and you've got some connections to systems, right? So this is kind of the usage representation of that, right? So in this, we're really kind of seeing that email is driving your users to go to all your digital sites, right? The email is driving your users to go to the website, to do some sort of interaction or transactional interaction that then kind of gets written back to the AMS. You're doing some stuff, from an event management standpoint. Email is kind of your big driver, right? So it's very powerful and it's very useful, but this is a closed system. So this works really, really well for your current users where you do have an email address for them and you do have the ability to talk to them because they're known to you. However, there's no way to break in here and get leads in here. You're not actually able to target leads because you can't email them because you don't have an email address. So the biggest challenge for associations today, especially those who are now kind of being tasked with growth, right, acquisition, to say, go out and get new revenue, go out and find new members. We need new blood in the door, for whatever reason. We've got shrinking membership bases, demographics changing, shifting, whatever the reason is, you are now kind of tasked with the fact of like, how do I go, what do I do now? And that's where lead generation programs come into play. All right, so today we're using the example of eBooks, and you'll see that eBooks are rather powerful. It's a compelling way in which to really gather some leads, right? Because it's tapping into typically what an association has, kind of as the premise, experience, expertise, and content, right? And it's really kind of putting it together and leveraging digital marketing principles so as to get those leads in the door. Right, so I just want you to be mindful of this, that what you're doing today is perfectly fine for a membership retention standpoint, but the reason you need leads is essentially this is kind of your closed ecosystem and your closed user journey, right? So you really want to break out of that. So when we talk about leads, there's a general perception that they're really difficult to acquire. That it's not easy. It's not so much that it's not easy. What we're seeing mostly is that there's some sort of combination of factors, it's either perception, it's lack of awareness, or just kind of not really having the discipline to put it all together that prevents associations from really optimizing, putting in their lead gen programs and then optimizing them, right? So, from a perception standpoint, there's always that perception of lead gen is really expensive because you have to go and spend a lot of money. Advertising, you have to do a lot of ad buys or campaign buys. And very often it gets lumped into lead generation, gets lumped into the sales-oriented function, right? So that's like a sales lead. It's not so much a marketing responsibility. Other things that make it a little bit more difficult to just kind of manage that perception or why leads might be difficult to acquire is not knowing all the pieces of digital marketing that you can tap into in order to expose your offer and really bring people back in and collect that data that you want. Right, so really it's kind of tapping into your audience segmentation. It's knowing who you want to target, right? Your personalization kind of elements to that, your actual personas, understanding them and knowing where they are and how they go about their day, right? That makes a big difference if you know that, 50%, so if you pick a certain persona, 50% of the time they start their day looking at LinkedIn and kind of all the updates that are going on in LinkedIn, right? Just knowing that and acknowledging that means that you can prep and you can create a campaign that revolves around that particular piece, as well as doing the other pieces, right? So it's really taking the time to sit down and map out your integrated marketing campaign and really kind of tie it back to your offer, right? So this is kind of why we say, what we're seeing is sometimes no one's fishing where the fish actually are, right? So social media is very powerful, LinkedIn, Twitter, to a lesser degree, Facebook, but again, you'd be surprised how many organizations actually have a lot of activity and potential on Facebook, right? And there's a heavy reliance on email alone, right? So those factors alone kind of start to really kind of weigh down and get in the way of putting together lead generation programs just because it seems like it's very difficult to do. Right, so what I want to talk about today is just kind of breaking down the formula a little bit and giving you some insights into how you can leverage something as simple as an ebook and get at least one program off the ground working for you. So before we move on, what I want to point out kind of in this diagram here towards the right is just typically, this is what we're seeing kind of as the funnel that works for, automation, for marketing automation. I put that in here because, when you see a sales funnel, right, or sales or marketing funnel, you'll see it's kind of wide at the mouth and then, narrow at the bottom. What we're seeing inside of associations today is that from the customer, member, donor part, kind of the middle part of the funnel, the email automation. So many organizations have kind of tapped into email automation, right? And what that means is that they've got their programs where you've got a good amount of follow-up. You've got programs in place where, somebody puts something in their shopping cart, they don't purchase it. You've executed, recurring triggered emails that remind them of something in their shopping cart, things like that, right? So, but this is all having to do with repeat customers, right? People you already know. The top part of the funnel, which is really kind of the inbound sales funnel, the inbound marketing funnel, if you will, that's the piece that's tied to lead gen alone, right? And that's really kind of where marketing automation taps into that, because you need to know more insights about your prospects to know where you're going to be, to catch them, and then push them down this funnel, right? So really kind of, again, we're using in this example today when we're talking about eBooks, an opportunity to put an ebook in front of someone who's unknown so that they will read the offer and then turn into possibly a prospect, then a lead, and then an opportunity, at which point you potentially could convert them, right? So the idea here is to cast your net wide enough, be in the right places with your offer, which is the ebook, and then have your campaign do the rest of the heavy lifting for you. So just taking kind of switching gears. So we've talked about what leads are, why they're important, what some of your blocking points might be in putting together a lead generation program. Let's switch and kind of look at some of the elements you would need to put together a lead gen program, right? So here's what's an ebook, right? So I think I threw in some definitions here. Basically they're rather commonly kind of understood. It's a book publication made available in digital form, consisting of text, images, or both, readable on a computer or on an electronic device. And that's more the emphasis that it is today than it used to be in the past, right? So it's not tied to just a desktop, it's tied to a mobile device or some sort of flat tablet device. And in the past, I think there was a perception, or it was just a reality, maybe like 5 years ago or so, that it was an electronic version of something that already existed in print. However, I want to point out today that now there are ebooks that exist without a printed equivalent, right? And we're definitely seeing that transition in the marketplace as well, right? So again, it's something to pause and acknowledge, because again, I want you to think about your particular audience, right? So who are you targeting? Are you targeting millennials? Are you targeting Gen X? Are you targeting baby boomers? What are their own consumption preferences? And what you're seeing kind of in the market, right, seeing that ebooks now exist without a printed counterpart or equivalent, is that generational shift, right? That understanding that not everything has to be a replica of what you have, but you're really kind of now keying off of what people are looking for. So we're finding that ebooks, as an offer, right? So just as something that you can offer someone, are going through a faster rate of adoption today. And that's, again, as I said, I think it's a shift in audience demographics has a lot to do with it. So now we're targeting millennials, most likely, right? Even if we're not, we're certainly seeing a demographic that's, any of your demographics, more acceptable or more kind of amenable to consuming information in some sort of digital format, right? So yes, maybe they'll still want to print it out, but they won't fight you on it if you say, I can give it to you in an electronic format. We're also seeing kind of that shift in as YouTube is being the source for the do-it-yourselfers, right? So again, people are becoming much more comfortable with finding the information online, whether they find it through Google or some other search engine, finding it through YouTube, watching, consuming the information right there kind of at that moment, when they need it, kind of at their fingertips, right? So this is why ebooks are kind of a popular way in which to combine your particular content and distribute it, because it's something that it would be readily consumed, right? So you don't have to convince people now that this is something that you would want, that this would be handy or useful. It's just really kind of more about, creating the compelling experience inside of your ebook itself. right? So it's also, of course, it's easier to produce in some capacities, right? You don't have to worry about production costs, publishing costs, printing costs, right? And also it can be used to, it can be leveraged by digital marketing to expand your exposure, right? So kind of one of the offset benefits of having an ebook being out there and having all your campaigns digitally point to that are that you benefit from search engine optimization opportunities as well. So as I said, ebooks are very effective for associations as a lead gen mechanism, specifically for, because it's a lower cost of production and you can use it across many channels, right? It is shareable, it is updatable, right? So it's a lot easier to update an ebook than it would be to update a print publication, right? And then have that in circulation and make sure that people are downloading or collecting, not downloading, but collecting the right print publication, right? As I said, it helps with search engine optimization as well. And it gives you an opportunity to really collect data beyond the who's purchased it, right? So an ebook, just by nature of being digital, it's just out there. Now you're collecting insights into not only who's purchased it or who's consumed it, but what time of day did they consume it? How did they consume it? Where did they come from? What domain referral they came from? What IP address they came from? And again, if you're using all of your digital channels to market and to push it out, then you'll know they came from your social media push or versus direct traffic versus an email that you put out, right? So there's a lot of different ways in which to connect all those pieces together to give you a bigger picture of is the offer itself, is the ebook effective? Who did it attract? What kind of people did it attract? Did it align with who we're trying to attract as part of our lead gen program? Right, so just things to think about. We often find that many of our clients kind of struggle with, ebook ideas, right? So it's the traditional, or rather it's not so much struggle as they use the traditional, well, we've got a publication that we normally do, here's a complimentary PDF download. Or, we're doing a webinar, so we can take the webinar and record it and then have it transcribed, and then here's the ebook representation of it. All right, so just some ideas that, again, because the definition of an ebook has kind of changed, it's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to be the exact copy of something that was put together in print. We're seeing a lot more variations now, right? So you could create an ebook for annual reports. You could do them for career profiles. You can do it as a deep dive on critical issues, an overview advocacy platform, or industry research. We have one organization, the Electronic Retailing Association, that essentially went to conference, and then out of their conference, they created multiple pieces of content and put some of those pieces together into an ebook. What they also did is they had an ongoing industry blog, and they picked the most popular topic that was very relevant to the industry at the time. They pulled down all the blogs related to that and then published it as an ebook, right? So they kind of took everything together and compiled it in a way so as to kind of offer this to users and to browsers and to visitors, so that they themselves didn't have to search for it on their own, right? So really kind of the power of an ebook as well is that you don't have to create it from scratch. And this, I think, is what many people find very appealing about it, that, should you have an idea for some sort of online content, it doesn't necessarily have to be the traditional story or article or newsletter, magazine article, things like that. You can really kind of take all your digital sources and really think about ways in which to craft them together. Ebooks themselves can be interactive, right? So there are many organizations out there that will help you publish an ebook and have them interactive, so that, truly taking that immersive, personalized experience kind of on a digital device to kind of say, click here for, another kind of subset into information. So it's not the traditional turn the page or scroll down to the next page type of interaction, right? So again, from that perspective, there's a lot of possibilities with ebooks. It gives you a lot more flexibility. There's no set limit to how long an ebook can be, right? But you really want to think about making sure that you have appealing and relevant content that is ultimately in a format that's optimized for online use. And that's the big thing here. It's not the same as a PDF. And we just do want to make that distinction because a PDF often, if you're creating an ebook in particular, it's a very nice graphical kind of representation. It's not like a Word document, it's something that looks really nice and slick. Usually, if you put it into a PDF format, that turns into a very large file format size, right? So it's very large. It takes a long time to download. It might turn people off from that. So you'll often see kind of applications that say, download the reader or download the online application for this ebook or things like that, right? So the idea here is to kind of take that PDF once it's converted and transform it into HTML5, right? So you want it to be responsive to devices so that it can be read from a link rather than an actual file downloaded to your desktop. The key thing here inside of creating an ebook, and this goes back to tying it back to your lead gen program, is that this is your content offer that you're going to offer for free in exchange for information, right? And that's the key thing about putting together kind of a lead generation campaign, right? And generating leads. You get leads by putting an offer out there in exchange for something that you want in return, right? So obviously, in order to do that, you need a couple of campaign elements to put the full campaign together. So you would need a landing page to convert those prospects into your leads and convince them to submit the information, right? So, while your ebook is your core piece, because you can't really start a campaign without it, you do need something to offer. You do need other elements to get going, right? So apart from your offer, which is the ebook, you probably need a landing page. You probably need two. One is the actual landing page itself, as well as the thank you landing page when somebody is given their information, right? So your landing page becomes key because that's how you're going to explain your offer. You're going to pitch that offer to them. It's typically a web page that sits, again, it could sit nested inside of your website. Typically, landing pages are outside of your website. And the difference is because, again, the offer itself and the user journey, to get to the landing page and then subsequently convert or do what you want them to do, you don't want to distract them by having them go off and look at something else. So, if you're having that discussion, I would advise you to kind of really think about, if we're on the page, what do we want them to do? And really think of it from that perspective. That is typically why if you start kind of looking at examples and just going out there, you'll often see landing pages have some sort of branded elements to them to tie them back to the organizational brand. But it's very rare to see all the navigation replicated. Perhaps you'll only see a couple of pieces replicated, but really the idea is to focus on the content, focus on the actual positioning of the message that's on the page so that the user can understand what the offer is and then make that decision of, do I want it? If so, here's what I'm going to enter in to be able to kind of get that information. So even on your landing page, apart from your actual offer and your copy, which is very important, you'll need a form, right? So the form is kind of your key element, right? And so it's kind of asterisked here. It's very, very important. What you put on that form, right, makes a difference. It's a split-second impression of kind of how much information do I as a consumer, right, or as a prospect, how much information do I really have to give to you before you're willing to give me your ebook, right? So again, you really want to think about what data do you want at minimum to get that ebook. At minimum, everyone wants an email address because that is the one thing that you can do some sort of follow-up with. It'd be nice if I could get phone number, but most people don't want to do that because they don't want to receive calls, right? An email address, I think at this point in time is kind of the fundamental, like, okay, that's accepted. If I really want to receive this, I'll give you my email address. That's what I'm willing to do, right? So again, though, you have opportunities to collect additional information. So you really want to think about striking the balance. Like, how much information am I going to get, right? And then, what will I do with it? Is there something I can do with it right away? The last piece, these are for, kind of optimizing all of your lead gen campaigns, but typically you will see some sort of automation workflow tied to these campaigns, right? So essentially it's a way in which to manage or figure out how are you going to follow up with your leads, right? So are you going to do them automatically? Are you going to send reminders? Are you going to wait to see what else they do before you send another kind of trigger or something to further kind of engage with them and initiate contact with them, right? So those are kind of your core elements of what you need to get going. So I thought I put in some examples here of what we're seeing kind of out in the market for eBooks, right? So Again, this is kind of some positioning that you could look at, right? So it's telling you view the interactive ebook, right? So engage with this ebook to learn about the following things, right? So it's giving you some more information. So again, from that perspective, you do have to think about what's the most compelling piece of the ebook that you really want to bring to the surface, and how do you want to kind of manage that and reach out to your prospects, right? So again, when we're thinking about creative ways in which to collect data, right? So once our organization has kind of said, go ahead and feel free to share this ebook, but all you have to do is answer 2 questions to customize your ebook experience, right? So these are interactive ebooks which are kind of trying to, not even kind of at the campaign offer level, but really trying to say that an ebook itself doesn't have to be a static, flat experience. You can customize, or you have options to customize your ebook experience, right, by answering some of the questions, right? So in this case, you can clearly tell kind of what they're trying to do, right? From a marketing perspective, I'm trying to find out, you fit any one of my personas that I've designed an ebook for. I have probably 3 versions of an ebook to give you. I want to know which one you fit best, because afterwards, not only will I capture that information, but if I've got a marketing automation platform, then I can watch your behavior as you browse, not only through my ebook, but should you come back and look at other things that I have to offer, I will know that you are a developer. Therefore, you are spending a lot of time on this section of the website, or spending a lot of time taking a look at our API documentation or something like that. Therefore, I in turn could come up with another kind of series of communications in which to interact with you and point you to certain things through interactive calls to action, pop-up sliders to kind of say, did you find what you were looking for? People who are looking at this are often also interested in this, that type of stuff, right? But that's the idea, right? So to try to kind of generate some sort of interest, to do that. Right, so again, answering 2 questions, it'll ask you tell us your 4 concerns based on the answers that you put in here. Here's kind of the version of the ebook that you received, right? So just at the individual kind of ebook level, going back to your offer, you do have a lot of options to be creative, right? And so what I like about these examples is that it really breaks it down. So you are in a position, and it's not that difficult to do. There are a lot of vendors out there that produce ebooks such as these and kind of design. You can design them yourself so that you're creating kind of those breakpoints within the ebook content itself, so that you can provide that value-added experience. So what I wanted to do also is give you guys a quick case study for an organization that's actually put this into action as part of their lead gen campaign. They're the American Payroll Association, and essentially they had a campaign goal, which is essentially to collect insights and contact information for specific personas, a very, very specifically designed persona. And the idea is that we would provide an offer that's very compelling to that persona, and the intent is to collect their initial email address so we can communicate with them, and then initiate a series of workflows for additional follow-up, right? The long-term goal is to get these qualified leads, if they become qualified leads, to convert them to members, right? So our personas in particular are young professionals in the payroll industry who are looking for specific information on basic topics in the field, right? So what we know about this persona, these 2 personas, is that they don't really know who the American Payroll Association is, right? And that is kind of the key thing. The whole purpose of this lead gen program is to really kind of say, we need to find leads of people who don't know us, but who would benefit highly from all the educational and career development materials that we put out there on a regular basis. These are kind of our young members, our young future prospect members that we really want to target. So let's give them something so that we can demonstrate our value right up front and then continue to hook them, right? So these people, right, these individuals are likely to get tasked to get something done, but they don't have a lot of internal oversight, right? They're young in the organization. They're probably either at very large companies where there's not a lot of hand-holding, or at small companies where they are the only one, right? So they've just entered kind of the marketplace. They're likely millennials, right? So they've been kind of tasked with, figure it out on your own. Don't come bother me until, you truly are stuck, right? So again, these are personas that are likely to search online, right? They're likely to go to YouTube to figure out how to do something if they had to figure something out. So these are essentially our personas that we wanted to attract, right? So the idea is that we have an ebook called Understanding Your Pay, and it is essentially an ebook that gives you kind of the rundown on all the basics that you would need to know about payroll today. So we put together a landing page, right? So we've got some visual branding to make sure that it's tied to the American Payroll Association and it's very clear. We've got a nice tagline saying it's 21,000 people can't be wrong. Again, we're assuming that somebody who's coming to this page does not know anything about APA, so we've got to grab their attention right away, right, and get them interested. The page itself is a web page, so it is SEO optimized. So all the text on this page has been selected for a very specific purpose. The page title's been optimized, metadata's been in there, right? We've tied keyword phrases so that should someone search for us, they'll be able to find us here, right? So, and the offer is very clear, right? So download the free ebook today, right? The offer, you know, we don't have too much on the page itself. We're still trying to get very clear. You'll notice that this is, you know, again, we're tying back, we're pointing to personas that don't know anything about APA, but we've exercised some discipline. We've not said, learn about APA or come view our membership. We want to put the offer right in front of them because we know it's a compelling offer for them, right? So this is clearly kind of our positioning is rather clear, right? So then we've got our ask. And, you know, again, from a lead generation standpoint, the form is the most important element of the campaign. So, you know, while it takes time to obviously produce the ebook, and it takes a little bit of time to refine the copy on the landing pages, the most important piece is the form, right? Because this is where somebody, your persona, will make that snap decision of, are you asking me too much information and I don't want to do it, or what you're asking me is reasonable, I'll go ahead and do it, right? So for us, for the American Payroll Association, we asked for 4 basic pieces of information: first name, last name, email address, which is really what we want. And we put one more in there, right, saying years of experience in payroll. The reason this particular field is in there and it's required is because what we are also trying to do is identify our personas. Eventually, right, so this campaign is going to sit out there and it's currently targeted to, you know, one persona type only. In the future, it will be opened up and exposed via social media. We'll be promoting it through other opportunities. It's a web page, so it'll be optimized for search. We would expect other personas to possibly hit this page because there are some compelling topics that would be of interest to those personas as well, right? So this is our pilot program, right? So having said that, we really want to ask this question because this question will help us in the future assign what persona came through here, and based on this number, we will be able to automatically put them into a persona as it gets written into their marketing automation platform. Right, so that's the reason why this particular question is here. The other topics of interest are there simply to kind of gauge interest, right? Again, these are people who don't know anything about APA, possibly new to the industry or starting out in their careers. We want to kind of set the stage and give a soft sell to kind of say, you know, here are the, tell us the other stuff that you might be interested in. If they happen to do that, right? If they happen to actually provide that information for them, for us, we will do additional follow-ups, right? But it's just a way to kind of capture information. So again, the discussion here is figuring out, is this the right balance, right? Is this enough? Is this too much, or is this too little, right? And so this is kind of where you really want to think about what your offer is. Now, in most marketing automation platforms, you'll see something called progressive profiling. And what that means is that once you come back, or if we know who you are, right, we won't ask you to fill out the same form fields again. We may ask you to fill out different fields, right, because we already know the information. So knowing that this is a first-time effort, right, these are targeted personas who we don't know anything about, and so this is kind of limited, this is the, this is the limit to the number of questions that we're going to put on the form. So once I filled out the form, right, I've hit submit. We want to show a thank you landing page. You could redirect them to some other page, but typically, from a best practices standpoint, especially inside of inbound marketing, you want to give them a thank you page and make sure that they know that your transaction process, right? You don't want to give them too much information at this point that's too overwhelming and scare them off. You definitely kind of want to make sure that they understand that the ebook is on its way, right? So it's an automated email now. So you have options. You could say, download your ebook here or receive the email. So the reason we chose to say, be on the lookout for the email that's coming in your inbox right away is we want to make sure that we got a valid email address, right? So again, it's kind of, it's thinking about what's most important. for us in this particular pilot campaign, the most important measurement is to get that email address, that prospect lead email address. And so again, we want to make sure that what email address they've given us is a legitimate email address that will receive the email. So that's why we don't have a link here on this page to say, here you go, download it from here. You could, all right, but then that's been a conscious decision. But we've also kind of, you'll notice this here, right? So very similar to kind of the setup of the landing page itself, where we don't replicate navigation too much. We've not really put too many other links in here, right? We want to kind of, we kind of want to limit the experience to a degree to kind of say, we know this is what you came for. We don't want to kind of alienate you too much with overwhelming information. However, if there is a secondary journey that you are to take, we want you to take this one. And that would be, you know, check out the additional resources APA has to offer. That takes you to a specific other page. It does not take you to the home page. If it takes you to the home page, we're thinking that for this particular targeted audience, they would get lost. For us, we want to drive them kind of as a secondary user behavior, right? So we'll take them to a specific page that has very kind of clear demarcated path that we, again, you know, now that we know who they are, so the cookie's been dropped on their browser, you know, we can track their progress in their journey. Right, so the idea is, again, to give them what they're looking for, but also, you know, the exchange of, you know, the reason we gave them the free ebook is because we want additional data in return, and this is how we can collect some of our insights. So now the email, the automated email, is on its way, and this is the email that they get in their inbox, probably a minute to 90 seconds later, and it automatically sends whenever the form is submitted. So again, we've implemented kind of certain triggers or tripwires so that, you know, this kind of works so that you can go ahead and think about other things and not have to worry about, now I have to send an email or I have to do this stuff, right? So the whole point here is to give them the offer. So again, even in the email that we send back to the user, we do not clutter it with a lot of stuff. This is probably one of the hardest things for most associations to get to be okay with, is that you exercise the discipline to say, you know what, I really want to do the upsell, but you have to stop because this is not what they were asking for. The idea is to say that, you know what, I would much prefer to get a qualified, valid email address in the door and then watch to see if they actually download the ebook, right, as my qualifier for like, oh, okay, I pushed it a little bit further. Now I'm going to wait a little bit, see what they do, see if they come back on their own before I reach out to them again, right, either kind of manually in some sort of scheduled email communications or some other type of digital activity with them, or on an automated basis, right? But the idea here is thanks for giving us the information that you gave us. Here's the ebook. We hope you're, you know, if you're looking for additional stuff, feel free to check out our website. And the big call to action in the email is download the ebook and enjoy, right? So that's the idea, right? So now when I hit download the ebook, I don't get my PDF file. I get my, here's the ebook, whether it's interactive or kind of, you know, something that's portable that I can kind of read and consume. The last piece is, again, optional, but this is what APA is doing, is we're doing some automated workflows, right? So the idea is to kind of say, we will build branches out and automate communications with those who have clicked on the link to download, right, before sending them another offer, right? In our world, we're still going after those personas. Those personas are not members, right? All they did was download the ebook. We want them to become members. Therefore, we're going to check to see, did they fill out the form and give us any other topics they were interested in? And did they download the link, right? Did they download the ebook? Did they go for it? If they didn't go for it, right? If they did not, then we can set up a separate branch to say, you know what, let's follow up with them and remind them in 3 days that, you know, the download's there waiting for you. Right, just like a friendly reminder, you know, don't forget, you can find like really helpful pieces of information in here and, you know, do some sort of follow-up, right? So that's the idea. So part of the lead gen campaign, what's powerful when you tap into marketing automation is that you can string all these experiences together to really have like a seamless kind of follow-up program where we're constantly pushing leads through the funnel and trying to get them down a little bit further, right? So those are kind of the pieces. So to wrap up, I'm going to talk about how do you measure the success, right? So again, you know, we're talking about gaining leads through eBooks, right? So obviously you measure your success by saying, you know, how many leads did we get, right? But again, don't think about this from a campaign perspective as well. Don't forget, this is a marketing campaign. Sure, you've got lead gen, and so your ultimate kind of qualifier for success if somebody says, how did we do? You would obviously point to, here's the number of leads that came in, right? So that's really what you're looking for, the number of form submissions, right? But in addition to that, you could also still think about, how effective were you in leading up to getting people to look at your page, right? And then how effective were you in kind of the follow-ups and how did you get your message out? All of these items that I've listed here are metrics that you could combine together, right? So that you can look at it from an aggregate perspective. You can go from like, okay, this is a nice to have, this is secondary. You would use all of these kind of in different capacities, right? You would use these to evaluate your progress, how you did, and things to improve in the future, right? So the number of email clicks that you got, right? So you had to send an email to someone, right? Or you had to put out a banner ad with a link to the landing page. You did something to get people to the landing page. Then therefore, how many people viewed the landing page, right? So again, while you're looking for people how many people landed on the landing page and then hit submit, it doesn't mean that your worldview has to be that small, right? So landing page views, again, talk to a larger indicator of success from a marketing standpoint in terms of how successful were you in getting your message out there, because it is a web page. So therefore, how did you drive traffic there? And same thing with the number of download clicks, right? So we would see that as kind of in this particular campaign for APA, we're going to measure it for the number of form submissions because that's what we want. We want the email addresses. However, secondary would be the download clicks, right? To see how many people actually were interested in the offer itself. Again, it really kind of depends on what the intent of your campaign is and how you're going to measure for success. So that's really kind of some of the metrics that you could use as well. Page refers in particular, right? Those have to do with where did your traffic come from, right? So how did you get your word out to get to your landing page? Did you use social media, right? Did you post on social media? Did you do paid advertising? Did you do sponsored content on LinkedIn? Did you do everything via direct email? Was search engine optimized enough so that people were finding you through organic searches by actually typing in, basics of payroll, understanding basics of payroll, tips for understanding, how to deal with garnishments and the year stuff, right? Things like that, right? Did you get direct traffic? How much of a direct traffic it was and how much of referrals? Did you have partners also pointing you back there, right? Did you put it in your private community and have other people kind of take your thing and put it out there, and vendors and partners, right? So what you want to see kind of, from marketing, when you put your marketing hat on, you want to see kind of like a nice mix, right? It's not just one thing. You want to see a combination because, again, it tells you the effective reach of how your marketing is, right, overall, right? But these are the things that you would essentially kind of evaluate and see, how they work kind of in tandem together. So then as a quick recap then, right, so obviously eBooks are a powerful way to generate leads. Again, you go back to they're the content that you have, right? So again, from that perspective, most people feel, there are many who equate an ebook to a white paper, and they equate it to the white paper. It takes a long time to put together. We need subject matter experts to be able to write it, but it means we have to outsource and we have to send it somewhere. And that's not necessarily the case anymore, right? So again, think about your ebooks from a point of digital media. It could be, an interactive book. It could be, the ideas that we had earlier in the slide about annual reports. It could be clickable materials. As I said, ERA took essentially their industry blog and curated it for certain pieces of content or topics, and then essentially pulled all those blog posts together and created an ebook based on that, right? So that's a very kind of powerful way to recycle content that you already have. Often you'll see ebooks do that, right? So ebooks, at least the more modern ones, the ones that are kind of sitting out there, it's not new information. It's just repackaged in a way that it's easier to consume via mobile device, right? And in some cases, it's, they could be very in-depth, and in some cases, it could be a high-level overview. So it really kind of depends on what you're creating and who would be interested in your ebook. So again, it goes back to knowing your audience, knowing your personas, knowing who would consume them, right? So make sure that your ebook is relevant and useful, and then leverage your digital marketing vehicles to build that exposure, right? So again, remember, you need all your elements for a landing page. You need a form. You need obviously your ebook, and you need some components to pull that together, right? But don't forget that once your landing page sits out there, you should tap back into all of your digital marketing vehicles to generate that exposure. So via social media, to tweet, via paid advertising, you can do organic searches, right? Tell your vendors, right? Your email signature at the bottom. If you are dealing with external audiences, you can certainly tell your staff. You can create a little banner on your email signature because it say download the latest ebook on the following topic for advocacy for anything that you have, right? And then make sure that all of your campaign elements for the lead gen activity are optimized, right? So pay particular attention to, obviously, in addition to the ebook itself, think about the copy and the positioning of what you're seeing on your landing page. You don't have that much room to really get very verbose or lengthy. You really kind of have to get to the point and kind of say, here's why it's compelling for you. Give me your email address and I'll give you this book because blah, blah, blah. That's what you need, right? And don't forget your form, right? So your form and what you're asking for is the biggest ask that you're asking is very important. So you're going to really want to think about, what do I really need? As a marketer, I would love to have lots of information, right? But at core minimum, I really need your email address. And you'll see forms, right? So again, I encourage you to kind of, as you do your own browsing experiences now, pay attention to kind of what's being asked on some of the forms. Often you'll see forms just ask simply for an email address. They don't even want name. They just want an email address, either for validation purposes, right? They're like, I don't need you to log in. I just want an email address to kind of work with you, or they just want a Twitter handle, right? Or they just want one piece of information because likely they are able to tap into other sources that can connect all the other pieces, right? So from a lead gen perspective, they really want to know, that one piece, and kind of take it from that perspective. And then lastly, don't forget to measure your results and refine, right? So as you put your campaigns out, and if you have one particular ebook that you're pushing out to get new leads, right, have it sit out there, go back and measure, figure out kind of what your metrics are for success, and then take a look and see how it performed, right? So go back and take a look at how many landing pages views you've had, and then where's all the traffic coming from? If the traffic is all direct, right, that means that somebody took the URL and popped it into their browser directly, right? So that's kind of more word of mouth, somebody's giving someone something, right? Then you want to think of ways in which to expand. So should we kind of promote a little bit more on social media? Should we encourage our partners, right? Our sister sites, our sister organizations, all the other websites that are sitting out there that point to us to also have something to point to this, right? So see what your referrals look like, your page source traffic, and see what you can kind of optimize from that perspective as well. So that's all I have to share with you today on this Friday. If you have any questions, I'll leave the line open. You can feel free to use the chat window to post your questions. Thanks for attending, and don't forget next month at HighRoad View, we'll be talking about personalizing the member experience via email as well as the website. So thanks for attending today, and thanks for your time.